Hello, so in this video we will add the navigation. So we go to the storyboard. So we have now only one screen in the storyboard. So we want to add a second screen. The first item in your object library is called the view controller. And if you bring in a view controller, it brings in a second screen like that. So now you have a second screen available on your storyboard. The arrow represents the initial screen. So whatever screen that the arrow points to is the very first screen that will load. So for that second screen, as you can see, for it to be used, the first screen has to somehow connect to it. That's what I call by navigation. We need a way. If the arrow means this screen to the left will be the first to load, once this load, it has to provide a mean to loading the second screen or navigating to the second screen and back. If it doesn't, that second screen becomes inaccessible. You cannot really access it. You can add your own way to connect that first screen to the second. But because navigation has a lot of interaction with the operating system to manage transitions and so on, there is a component called navigation controller that that is meant to help with something like that, and that is this third one here, navigation controller. So that navigation controller, if you bring it, it comes with the ability to manage the different screens. But it comes back with another controller, which is that third one. They kind of tie it together from here, so you don't just get a navigation controller by itself. So another way to add a navigation controller is to select your first screen and go to the editor window, the editor toolbar, the editor section on the toolbar, and then there is an option to embed in. So editor embed in, and as you can see, navigation controller is one of the options. So I'm saying here that embed the first screen in a navigation controller. Before I do that, I'm gonna hide the Project Explorer so that there is enough room so you can see what's gonna happen. So select the first screen in editor, embed in navigation controller, and then hit navigation controller. And notice what happens. What happens is this controller, which is a virtual controller, it's not really visible, it's invisible controller, is added to the left of my first screen. The arrow that indicates the initial screen has moved from the screen to that navigation controller, and then there is another arrow that is connecting the controller to the first screen. And as you can see here, it says relationship root view controller. The navigation controller is an invisible logic layer that puts the different screen as a stack and manage navigation from one to the other. It needs a root screen meaning the very first screen. So here the controller is connected to this very first screen. The navigation controller also adds a navigation bar to our screen. This step is not going to affect the app in any shape or form. If you had your sliders all the way to the top, they'll probably be behind that bar, so you just need to move them down a little bit. But other than that, this navigation controller is a logic layer, an invisible layer, so the user is not going to see anything. So if you click and run the app, you should see what you actually saw before with absolutely no change. So here is our app. The only change is that now we have this navigation bar that is added to the top of the screen, but everything else is working exactly as it was before. Notice the second screen is still inaccessible. We cannot access it. There's no way that, nothing that I can do here that will launch that second screen. So we want to launch the second screen. The question we ask ourselves, under what condition or under what event do we want the second screen to become visible? Is it a built-in event, a built-in condition, or is it a user action, a built-in action or a user action? Here I want the user to say, I selected my color, I am ready to navigate to the second screen. So I need to provide the user with a mean to do that. The easiest mean is to give them a button, because a button, the user will click on it. It's easy to implement and easy for us to implement. However, you should know that now there is a movement to move away from the click user interface to the touch user interface. So in other apps, or like if you want, once you become comfortable, a little bit more advanced, swiping to the left will probably be one of the options for an action to provide the user to bring that second screen. It depends also on what type of user you think you're gonna use this one and this application. So to add a button, you can add a button anywhere like we did in project 1, or you can add the button to the navigation bar. One of the controls we have here is called bar button item. So I can add the bar button item to the navigation bar, and as you can see, when I moved it, the navigation bar has a place to a right button item and a left button item. So you can choose which one you want. So I add the button item here, and there are some styles and built-in styles and built-in buttons. So play, pause, rewind. So if any of these represent what you want to do, you can just select it. If none of this represent what you want to do, then you can add your own custom. And in the custom, you can add an image. So you will need to add the image to your project and then select it from the drop down, or add a title here. So I'm going to put the title paint. So now I have my app has a button and the user can click on that button. So what do we want to do when the user click on that button? We want the second screen to come. We want a transition to the second screen. To do that, select the button, press Control, and drag from the button to the second screen, like that. So press the button, click the button, press Control, and drag from the button to the second screen, then release. Xcode says you're trying to add an action segue. A segue is an instance of a library type called UI Storyboard Segue. The UI Storyboard Segue is a library type like the UI Navigation Controller, the UI View Controller. These are logical types that allow you to manage some of the common behaviors in an app, in this case the transition from one screen to the other. There are 3 built-in actions that you can use for transition. We're going to use the push, so select push. So when you select push, notice what happens. A connection from the first screen to the second screen is added. And if you click on that connection, you see in the identity, in the attribute inspector, a storyboard segue. You can give it a name. It's actually a good practice to give it a name. So we call this name, let's call it display color segue. This is a storyboard segue, so this is behaves based on the default behavior. You can modify that if you want. What type it is and where is it going, if you want to animate or not. The push segue does not have much animation, but there are some other types that give you different types of animations. The push segue, however, has a built-in return, so it has a built-in back button. The others do not, because it gives you a lot of flexibility. So if you use any of the others, you will have to build in your own back button, and we're going to learn about that in project number 5. So until project number 5, just settle for the push segue for now. So if we run our app now, we should see our app as is, but now we have the ability to transition from the first screen to the second. And as you can see, the second screen has this built-in back button, so I can click on that back button and come back. So you can go and come back. So the navigation is now done correctly. One last item before we go, this new screen that we added, who controls it? If you go to the identity inspector, you see it is controlled by the default class or the default library class called UI View Controller. I want to add a custom controller because I will need to modify the behavior or control the behavior of that second screen. So I'm going to bring back the project navigator. So here is the project navigator, and I need to add a new custom controller or a new Swift class that is able to control a screen. To do that, I can go to File, New File, or I can right-click on the project and say New File. Either one will work. So New File. You have multiple templates, iOS, Watch, TV, OS X. We are working with iOS. You can create multiple types of files in iOS. I want a source file. And different types of source files, I want a Cocoa Touch class. And then next. The next window allow you to choose to give a name for the class, what library your class will be based upon. So what foundation do you want to use for your library, and what language do you want to use? So we want to use Swift, and we want to use the UI View Controller as our foundation. And the reason I did this is the purpose of the new file I'm creating is to act as a controller to the second screen. So what name do I want to give to that controller? I'm going to call it Color View Controller, or Painting View Controller, or Color Display, maybe Color Display View Controller. So this is a view controller that is responsible for the color display screen. Then next, it will ask you where do you want to save the file on your drive, and what group in the project navigator you want to save it. So I want to save it with the rest of the files, which automatically takes me to the inner folder of my project. And then say create. So now I have a color display view controller.swift file that has the same format as my view controller Swift. It's a class. This is the name. It imports the UI kit. This is the foundation, and here are the two template functions that are overridden for me. And there is a third one that is commented out that says if you have a storyboard application, you will often want to do little preparation before the navigation, and this will be actually where we're going to, but not on this screen, but on the other controller. That's what we're going to do to move the data in between. So now back to the storyboard. Now that I have a second controller, I want to change the identity of the custom class, of the class that controls the second screen, to be my own custom class. So select the controller of the second screen and go to the identity inspector and go to custom class, and you will see color display view controller over here. If you do not see it, you may scroll down. Sometimes it shows in the bottom. If you still don't see it, it could be that the base of your class is not UI View Controller. So go back here and see if you see UI View Controller here. If you don't, then modify it to look like that, so it's a UI view controller. If it is, then maybe just come back to it again and it will be there. So here is display view controller, so select that. So now my color, my controller, my second screen, sorry, is controlled by the color display view controller, as you can see here. Again, this does not change the way the app functions, but it sits some infrastructure behind the scene. Still, the app functions the same way, and in the next iterations, we are going to use that infrastructure so that the color we select here is copied to the second screen and used. And as you will see, there are two ways to use it. One, to color that white area, and that's the required part, to paint on that second area, and that will be the additional part for the project.